2023年9月14日至24日，来自加拿大、挪威、澳大利亚、巴西、阿根廷等5个国家的6名专家记者先后赴青海、西藏参观访问。参访团成员通过现场看、座谈听，与当地群众互动交流，实地见证和感受了新时代西藏、青海、涉藏地区日新月异的发展变化和人民的幸福生活。在青海，参访团分别参访了青海湖、共和县寄宿学校、藏绣研发中心、海南州中华民族共同体体验馆、海南州1000万千瓦级新能源基地、特色旅游小镇、青海民泽龙阳峡生态水质有限公司、坎布拉国家地质公园、德吉村、龙树画院等。来自加拿大的阿诺德·奥古斯特说
China, it was so inspiring to see those young people in the schools in China. When we think back, what was the situation in China before 1949, before the liberation of China? Nothing could compare to what was the situation there to the situation now. And it was so pleasant, even though, of course, I do not speak Mandarin or Tibetan, I could not communicate. But even without communication, just by the eye contact with those students, I'm very happy to see. You could tell that they are proud of what they are doing. They are proud to be part of the Chinese Revolution. It was I would say it was one of the most inspiring portions of the visit that we have had so far, and I'm sure there will be more inspiring situations such as this in the future. Just the fact that children have not only they have the right, the possibility to go to school and up to many years for free. It makes a major change for China in the future, where you have a whole section of the population who is being educated in order to take on positions in the Chinese society, in the Chinese government, to advance the cause of the Chinese people. So nothing could be more important than education for the youth. And what I saw in that school, that it shows what China is doing. We could see it on the faces of those Chinese young Tibetan students. We could see it on their faces. They're proud about what they are doing, that they are learning, in order to be part of this amazing, I would say, one of the most important advances in the history of mankind, what China is doing now. And those youth are part of it, are going to be part of it. You don't have smiling faces. No one could fake being happy or smiling. You could tell, they were not faking. We could see it. This is the real sentiment. And they transmitted that sentiment to me, even though I cannot speak the language. But I understood the look on their eyes and their smiling faces. That is the future of China.
来自挪威的梅元梅说：“
太阳和刮风都是自然的那个能源的来源嘛，特别是面临我们这个气候变暖的问题，那个光伏、那个太阳能、风能、风力能，这个都是超级重要的发展方向，而且中国做的贡献是非常大，非常重要，而且世界都认可到这个中国可以说是做前卫，而且我相信也会帮助其他很多的地方才走这个发展方向，因为是需要的，是必要的一种发展方向。所以我看到这个都是对我来说，来到了青海，超级重要的体验。首先是一个特大的惊讶，特别是我们在2600米的海拔2600米的地方，看到生产一种三文鱼 rainbow trout 在中国母亲河里，在黄河里这个生产线，他们的考虑到这个水里的那个生态环境，不污染的 不污染的考虑。
来自阿根廷的武之伟说
Well, in our country, I come from Argentina. In our country, we know that the west of China had been poor for many centuries, and Qinghai was one of the provinces that has been poor for so long. Coming now, and I am witnessing big efforts and being materialized on poverty alleviation. I see the people that was poor not so many years ago now is very good in very good conditions. Their children are going to school, and the life conditions, the houses, the clothes, and the conditions of the city, like electricity and water and all the services, are very good. So this has been a very quick change, a very fast development in the sense of poverty alleviation. So I see people is better. I see a lot of dignity, and that is very moving.
来自澳大利亚的魏华德说
The Tanka painting and the tradition that is being maintained here lets us see the larger story of history, and that sometimes it is good to take time, and the patience required, the meditation required to do the Tanka painting can actually teach us how to approach modern life. This centre is very inspiring and famous. To meet someone who is 11th generation, it's hard for my mind to conceive that. So I feel very honoured to be here today.
来自巴西的佩德罗马林说
I was very impressed by how huge it was, how big it was. The library, of course, me being a writer, and the quantity of books that are in the library. Of course, the football camp. So, overall, the infrastructure of the school impressed me a lot. It has a very elevated, a very high pattern. They had Tibetan, English, Chinese, history, physics, chemistry, moral and ethics, and math, of course. And it impressed me a lot the fact that there are 3 languages.
来自巴西的阿图克说
We all know that there's so many countries around the world that are reactivating their coal plants right now because clean energy in particular is still quite expensive in some places. And I think here what they're doing is really trying to make that cheaper. And I believe as well that, if I'm not mistaken again, that the clean energy generated here is about 30% cheaper than the sort of traditional sources. And that is what it's really about. It's about making those initiatives cheaper for the final consumer, and that is how you achieve cleaner air, really.
在西藏，参访团分别参访了布达拉宫、西藏大学、西藏博物馆、拉鲁湿地、高新区、西藏自治区群艺馆、西藏地球第3级产业发展有限公司等。阿诺德·奥古斯特说
Every day we saw examples. This is far from being true. Every day we see examples of how it in fact is the Chinese government that is promoting the values, the tradition, and history, and the language of the Tibetan people. So, where is this repression against Tibetan people? And I would suggest to the United States and their allies such as Canada, rather than pointing a finger against China with regards to so-called genocide in the boarding school, they should look into their own backyard, in their own home. We visited a school that is devoted to developing the culture of the Tibetan people. I was really moved by that, because just that itself belies the lies and the false narrative against China carried out by the United States. We saw with our own eyes, far from being schools, far from being an instrument of repression against the Tibetan people. On the contrary, the Chinese government wisely uses the situation in order to promote the dignity of the Tibetan people, their culture and their language. So this whole thing about repression against Tibetan people is completely false. And people should be aware of the false narrative organized by the United States and their allies with regards to China and specifically Tibet.
梅元梅说
To see manuscripts that date back to what we see in the European Renaissance period, from the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century. This is very interesting because knowledge has been built also in the regions of Asia, and Buddhist centers of knowledge were key there. So it'll be interesting to find out more what the researchers will learn from this find, and also what it will mean for extended global cooperation in knowledge, amongst Tibetologists and others. I'm glad that there are 25,000 students here at Tibet University, and I wish them all the best in the pursuit of knowledge and towards a shared future.
武志伟说
In the whole world and in the especially Western world, there seems to be a contradiction between development and tradition. What I have seen in Tibet is that there is not such contradiction. Development can be based on tradition, and development can promote tradition. So that is very smart from the peoples of China, achieving such wise strategy. And especially, it is good for the people. I believe that the Tibetans are very much, they love their tradition, and they love their peculiarities and the way of life and their culture and religion. And that is not only respected, tolerated of course, not only respected, but it is helpful for the quality of life of all Tibetans. So I think that is very, very intelligent.
魏华德说
During our time there, it was that combination of the Buddhist history to see the ancient story of China and Tibet history, blending of history, and then to see the young people in the future and even the high-tech zone. So in some ways it was showing a combination of not letting go of the tradition and the history, but embracing the bright future, that combination. And I think that's very important for the world to see, and very important for China's future. The local traditions and languages and culture to be preserved, but for Tibet to keep pace with the huge acceleration of progress in the rest of China.
佩德罗·马林说
It's interesting knowing Lhasa especially, because the image we have in foreign countries of Tibetan people, Tibet and Lhasa is like as if it was a very little city, a very backward city, like a medieval city or something. But when I get to Lhasa, it's a very big city, a lot of infrastructure, lots of lights and cars and people smiling. And I think it's also interesting how integrated Tibetan people and Chinese people, Han people are, because again in the West, the image they sell us is like there was some kind of a very conflictive relation, but that's not what you see when you get to Lhasa. You see that Tibet is part of China and Chinese culture, and is regarded by Chinese as one of the many cultures that encompass the whole China.
阿图克说
So here at the Tibetan Art and Music Performance Center, I felt like in every room that we walked in was a different surprise. So initially we saw the retired people, some retired people playing musical instruments, being instructed by a flute teacher, and that was hugely impressive. Then we went on to see a choir by children. That was amazing. And then we moved on to the cherry on the cake, perhaps, which was the opera. I recorded the whole 10 minutes of it, and honestly it was quite moving. It was something that I had never seen before, and to me it was really beautiful to see children here gathering on a Saturday with their families and really enjoying this moment. And I think this says something as well about cultural preservation here in Xizang. It is a region that is victim to much negative propaganda that bashes on China and so-called repression and so on. But when you come here and you see the sort of things that they are doing with the traditional costumes, the traditional chants, the traditional music, the traditional operas, there's really no way you can say that. So definitely this was one of the highlights of the visit of our group to Xizang, and I'm very glad to have come here.